The Parley is a debate event that champions open-mindedness, kindness and respectful dialogue when exploring contradictory ideas. Museum of Sticks and Stones would like to acknowledge and extend our deep respect to the traditional custodians of the land on which we work and live. This episode is recorded in Meanjin, the land of the Turrbal and Yagara people. We acknowledge their connection to land, sea and community and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Trish, where's hate speech heading?
Oh my gosh, that's such a huge question. Where's hate speech heading? I guess it depends on how effective Moss is at helping people to understand why we create hate. I'm hoping that as time progresses, humanity as a collective embraces empathy more and hate overarchingly decreases, but for all intents and purposes, I think it's actually the opposite right now.
It does seem to be that way. Like, how do we create more empathy in your personal life? Have you found anything that creates more empathy between people?
In my personal life, well, I think I'm naturally empathetic, almost too much so. But putting that to the side, I think our ability to connect with each other's experiences, which I guess is the definition of empathy, but creating spaces where people feel comfortable to share their perspectives and their experiences in life, and allowing the other person to connect with that. I think that's a really powerful tool in building empathy, because people want to, I think naturally we all want to talk to other people and share what our life experiences are, but you also have to feel safe enough to do that and not feel like you'll be judged for sharing.
Okay, so can you talk about your plans to create that kind of environment?
Yeah, so we have a few projects on the go. So I feel lucky that I get to project lead Museum of Sticks and Stones. And in doing that, I get to help design a lot of the creative activities and direction of what Moss will look like. So through our research that we've done with companies like Ipsos, we've been able to look at and gain information and perspectives from everyday Australians as to what their experiences are of hate and harm, particularly online. And those stories actually have driven a huge amount of what we've done. And just from hearing those perspectives and from some of the other research and surveys we've done, we've come to realise that people really want spaces where they can talk and connect and debate, which is, I guess, what the Parley is, and also share their experiences, which is also why we've started another thing called the Moss Story Project, where we've put out a call for people to share their stories and their experiences in whatever multimedia fashion they feel.
Can you tell us about some of the stories that you've heard for that project or previously in this whole topic that really stand out to you?
Yeah, so I think one of the most standout stories that we got through the research actually with Ipsos was one of the participants shared that they were surprised at not like the pervasiveness of hate and harm that they experienced online. So this research was really focused on digital spaces, and they were, once I guess they had been clued into what hate and harm could be, and also looking at all the different archetypes that they could inhabit when using online spaces, they communicated that, it's everywhere. Like, it could be in a comment thread, it could be in like a snarky group chat with one of your friends. And it was just surprising. Was it surprising? I don't know if it was surprising, but I guess a little bit demoralizing that people were communicating that in every style of communication, they were still receiving harm or hate. And that was genuinely shocking. I thought it was mainly like comment threads or Reddit or YouTube, comment sections that can get a bit vitriolic, but people were saying, that they experience it everywhere. There was also another two stories I'll quickly share that one other person mentioned that they were surprised at how easy it was to actually create harm and hate. So I think, we've spoken about these archetypes, and when you think about, for example, a troll, you might have like a certain picture of what that person might look like.
Male, 26, mum's basement.
Basement, probably living off a diet of Pepsi Max and, I don't know, crisps.
Cheetos,
Cheetos, you got to have that cheese dust on your fingers.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case. Like this one person explained how they had shared a photo of their daughter, I think, on Facebook, and were excited to share that they had had their daughter's ears pierced. And in this comment thread, which was mainly this person's friends and family, they received comments like, how dare you, abuse this child? And so that person who was seeing this image saw that content as harmful. So it was just, they were really surprised at how easy it was to accidentally create things that were harmful without the intent at all. So putting aside that stereotype of someone who might be sitting in their, basement intentionally stirring the pot, it's actually anyone that can do that, which is crazy.
I wonder as well, if you hear so much hate online, it hardens you because you expect to hear it now. So you approach the world in a rougher way than you otherwise would have before you even get that hate.
For sure. I think also particularly online, the disadvantage of communication mainly via text is you lack tone. I've often joked that I wish I could create like a typeface called Sarcastica, where you could, communicate what tone you mean something in based off that typeface. But yeah, when you're online, you could say something and it could be received so bluntly or so, I often have this, experience when I'm talking on Slack. I joke with my colleagues that the smiley face that's only subtly smiling is actually super passive aggressive. I want the full smiley with the blushing cheeks to know that you actually mean you're smiling.
Yeah, you don't want a half smile.
I don't want a half smile. So I think it's in those experiences as well where people might post something not even thinking about, any other way it could be received. And then all of a sudden people are saying, oh, that was harmful, or why are you being so rude or upfront? And it's in those minute experiences where you don't have the benefit of body language and eye contact that people are often, maybe miscommunicating hate or harm more than they intend.
A couple of the words that we talk about with hate or harm, wokeness and cancel culture. You've been involved in this area for a while now. What can you tell us about wokeness, our ideas about it changing? Where are we heading with this word?
Yeah, so I think in earlier episodes you spoke to Will about wokeness and its origins as a term for mainly POC, talking about being aware of things that would marginalise them and things like that. I personally, when I came across the term woke, I embraced the term because it's only in the last few years that I've really started to pay more attention to, I guess, how divisive the general atmosphere of the world is. But unfortunately, it's terms like wokeness, or I guess like feminism as well, that have been almost co-opted and flipped on their heads to mean something quite negative, even though that's not its original intent.
Snowflake and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, like, going back to people wanting to share their experiences, it makes it hard when you're instantaneously labelled as something that's perceived negatively. Like, if I'm saying, oh, I think we should tread more carefully around how we talk about race or, sexual identities, and all of a sudden you're being labelled as woke. It's like, well, then you're not actually allowing for that space for people to share what's truly on their heart and mind, and therefore build empathy and therefore reduce hate. At least, that's a very simplistic train of thought. But so, I think when I think about wokeness and where it's heading, without intention behind helping community and the general public understand why we create hate, terms like wokeness will just become more divisive, regardless of the initial good intent they may have had.
Do you ever watch 1960s English interviewers or TV shows or anything like that?
Is that where it's like, I instantly go to like radio interviews. It's like, good evening.
Yes.
Okay.
Really
vaguely.
Yeah. Well, just watching it, I think it was a 1960s BBC interview. It was a philosophy show, which you can never have on prime time now.
No.
But the language was so eloquent. They could say confronting things in a very delicate way because they were able to wield words really well. And so sometimes if you're skilled with language, I think you can be quite gentle with language but still get your point across. Whereas maybe now we've got this more abrasive way of talking. It makes it harder to say difficult things because we're just not as skilled as those 1960s British
True.
interviewers. So maybe language skill is one solution to just communication skill in general to improving the situation.
That's actually, a great point. I mean, when I was going through school, which was definitely very recently because I'm so young,
Yeah.
I remember like emphasis being put on expanding your vocabulary and reading time. And I had a physical thesaurus, which I have not seen since, again, yesterday because I'm so young. But I think now with just also the rapidity at which language evolves, slang, different cultures being thrown in there, it's hard to then, I guess, build a baseline of expanded, I guess, traditional vocabulary that people can then use when they need to communicate. But every, subsect of culture has their own slang, which could be misunderstood or misrepresented in other groups. So even that causes more friction because I think we have less shared common language between us all.
Yeah, less shared common language, and we're writing for mobile phones now, very short, sharp communication.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one possible solution. What about the idea of cancel culture? That's something that we've talked about in this series as well. What are your thoughts on that topic?
I loved the cancel culture parlay, not only because it was at a great venue, it was our second run at running the parlay. I was very proud of our team for putting that on, but also it really solidified for me what we were doing as a concept with the parlay, and also then picking a topic as current as cancel culture. I think, much like wokeness, it's a delicate topic. I can see validity in being able to call out bad behavior and then having, I guess, a more public reaction to that depending on what's happened. But I think one of the teams eloquently said something around that. It doesn't allow for growth or for the person that's been cancelled to really learn from the experience because they're essentially just shut off and, made a pariah for whatever they may have said or done, which in some circumstances, I guess, is necessary. But I think in order for us as a humanity, as a human race to progress, we need to allow for second chances, and cancel culture doesn't really seem to do that, unfortunately. So maybe, we need not a new cancel culture, I don't know, a new something to replace or to call out bad behaviour, but also allow for people to grow from that experience. Yeah.
It's interesting I wonder how this generation's children will be, because people always rebel against their parents.
Oh my gosh.
Will they rebel against these ideas of cancel culture and wokeness that their parents brought in and bring back a neo-conservativeness or neo-fundamentalism? Can you see that coming?
Well, now that you've pointed it out, yes. I hope not. I mean, I don't necessarily think being conservative is bad versus, being liberal. It's just that, for the next generation, it seems, at least for the very next generation, Gen Z, and I think Gen Alpha is the one after that, it seems like they actually are normalizing some of the things that we find so divisive, like differences in sexual identity or differences in race or how you want to express yourself. So maybe it's that they will find these things that we're currently struggling over to be super normal or the standard, and they'll find new things to be conservative about.
Yeah, okay. The pitch will shift. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess, but what the way to get there is through more conversation and dialogue, open dialogue. So tell me about what's coming up next for the Parley, for the Museum of Sticks and Stones. How are you going to help progress this conversation?
Yeah, so we have big dreams with Moss. I guess, starting with the Parley, we'll be having some more live shows in the coming year, so 2024 at the Powerhouse. Also around Southeast Queensland, we're hoping to have one at the Sunshine Coast and hopefully expand as we grow the team and things like that. We are also looking at how can we expand the Parley's reach. So we intentionally designed the Parley to be an in-person event because there is value in being in the same room looking at people's body language, understanding tone, that sometimes gets miscommunicated in a digital experience, particularly via text. But we're hoping to work with some of our other partners around how can we turn this into a bit more of a show that might be streamed or, aired on TV or something like that. So we're really wanting to expand the Parley to be something that anyone can access. We've also toyed with some great ideas like Parley in the pub, like, training a facilitator to go in like a trivia and run, facilitated debates, maybe on less divisive topics, I don't know, and have, general public get up, nominate themselves and have a fire round Parley, in a more chilled out setting. So I guess the aim of all of that is to just build further capacity for everybody to have more difficult conversations without, ripping layers off one another. In terms of Moss, we are still progressing with our research and activation and tool development. We're looking to do pop-up actual museum activations, which should be really cool. Our long-term vision with Moss is to actually build a physical space where people can come and understand the mechanics and reasons why we create hate and harm, and also see the humanity behind the human race, things around love and compassion and the times where people have united or experienced, true beauty or things like that. So we're really hoping that, not even hoping, we want Moss to be something that not only Brisbane is, I guess, known for, but helps people to really build capacity to understand why we create hate and harm and how to manage that for their own mental well-being.
So there's going to be a bit of work to get to that point.
Oh, yeah.
What are the challenges of doing this type of work? What are the difficult conversations that you face? What's hard about it?
Well, I think this is true for all social impact kind of work. It is emotionally draining. I love what I do. I love what I do very much. I find like working here has helped me identify a bit more of my purpose, I think. But you have to really be invested in the things you're doing in order, well, I think, to really make a difference. And, we at Meddlesome, our, tagline is Brave Ventures for Good, and tackling, complex social challenges. And in order to co-design those solutions, it requires a certain amount of emotional investment. And it's not light, like looking at hate and harm and, hearing the stories of some of the most horrific or even the microaggression kind of stuff that some people might brush off can be a little bit taxing. So I think that's one element. And I think we do a great job at managing our own mental well-being around, taking a bit of a break, taking some breathers and having some really productive conversations when we're dealing with more intense, topics and things like that. Also, I think we have a task ahead of us in terms of continuing to build the brand and the mission with the public. Interestingly, and also not surprisingly, like when we were posting for the Parley online to promote it, we also received hate for wanting to have what should have been a relatively, innocuous thing as having a debate, like creating space for people to share their experiences. And that's not lost on us. Like, we know it's going to take some effort to get people to understand what we're about and to get, I guess, on board or to socialise the idea that it's okay to talk about these kind of topics. And also you can do so without creating hate yourself. So, yeah, I think those are the two main challenges. I'm sure there'll be more, but we'll face them.
You'll face them when they come. Trisha, you mentioned you've got to put a lot of yourself into this work. Why is it important? What's the effect of hate on people?
That's a meta question. What is the effect of hate on people?
Yeah, I'll just come back to that first. Why is it important to you to do this work?
It's important. Personally, it's important to me because I've experienced hate.
Can you tell us a story or something that you're happy to share?
Oh, yeah, okay. Let's strap in. I think, like, growing up here, I was born in Australia. My parents are East and West African. And unsurprisingly, I have faced a myriad of racist experiences, both on the micro and macro scale. And I think it was only really in 2020, so COVID, Black Lives Matter, the whole shebang, where I started to really, I guess, acknowledge the toll it had taken on me and how much I had crafted myself around trying to avoid those circumstances. And yeah, it's not been easy. And also now that I'm aware of these things, I try to, I guess, de-internalize a lot of the things that I've experienced or how I've carried myself, because I'm trying to be more true to who I am without those, I guess, guardrails of trying to fit in.
Can you give us an example of trying to fit in? What were you doing before?
Yeah, okay. So a great example is my hair, which might seem small. Oh, it's actually quite big, but small to most people. But growing up, I used to chemically relax my hair because natural curls like this I wasn't allowed to wear at school. And also, like, there just weren't hair products anywhere in Brisbane, let alone Queensland, let alone, I'm pretty sure, Australia at the time. And the messaging that I received was, like, if I wore my hair naturally, not only would people always want to touch it, which is so annoying, but it was just like I was unkempt or like messy and things like that. And it's those, like, especially when I was younger, those like smaller messages that, you know, these very natural parts of me, like how the hair out of my head grows, weren't accepted, and or even worse, like kind of seen as gross or not okay. And it's only, literally 2020 when I was like, I'm going to actually stop that, because chemical relaxers are actually not good for you. FYI, people who are chemically relaxing, no shade, but probably stop. And started to figure out, like, how do I take care of the hair that grows out of my own head as a Black woman in Australia, which is massive. At least it was for me. And even just getting used to having a fro or wearing braids without feeling, I guess, judged, and also knowing that it's okay to tell people not to touch my hair, which has been a whole other thing. Yeah.
So were you carrying around a bit of anxiety because of that?
I think more than I even can acknowledge. And not just anxiety, but I think as I've continued to reflect, anger about it, because it's just exhausting always knowing that you don't fit in. And now that I'm clued on about it, it just makes me a bit ticked off.
Yeah. Interesting. So your behaviour changes, but the anxiety or the anger will still stay with you because that's quite deep rooted.
I think so. And I think that's like just one example of how, like, you know, the way we communicate or the things we say can really affect someone. And like, that's a small example. Like, I've had, and my family's had, like, outwardly racist experiences. And even though, you know, a project like Moss isn't necessarily focused on racism, it all feeds into hate and harm and how we communicate with one another. And so when I think about, you know, why this project is important to me, it's about creating not only the tools to handle those kind of experiences, but also cluing people into the fact that you might not think it's harmful to be like, oh my God, can I touch your hair? But to receive that 24/7 is actually harmful. And I'm sure most people said it purely out of curiosity or interest, but it was not received that way. And the only way for people to actually understand some of those nuances is to talk about them and share those experiences. So on every level, this project means quite a lot to me. Yeah.
Has this job played quite a healing role for you then because of being able to do this work?
I think so. I mean, I remember when we won this project, the grant funding for this project, and I was still very new at Meddlesome, and I had no idea the kind of role it would play on my life moving forward. I knew that coming to work here would positively impact me because I felt I had found something that I could spend a lot of my time doing that gave me or strengthened my purpose. But particularly for Moss, it has been healing because it's also just helped me realize that a lot of people may do or say things without really intending to. And whilst I don't think I'm an angry person or anything like that, but it's also kind of, I guess, brought back to my conscious brain that people do or say things out of fear, out of stress. And while they might not have ill intent behind it, one, it's okay to feel harmed by it, but it's also important to share those experiences and also bolster everyone's ability to talk about these things and manage them.
Part of that sharing is gathering stories from the public. So can you tell me about what you'd like from the public to bolster the work you're doing?
Yeah, so over the coming months, we have put out a call out to get people's experiences. We want people to openly contribute to the Museum of Sticks and Stones digital library. At the moment, we're receiving text-based stories, but we're growing it so that people can upload videos, share audio about their experiences of hate and harm, or even the opposite when, you've experienced something blissfully, heartwarming in humanity on and offline. And what we want to do, much like, I guess, Humans of New York, is to build this catalogue or repository of human experiences around this topic of hate and harm and also humanity and love. Because I think it's really in those sharing people's experiences that people can actually understand how much it can impact someone.
What makes social change in your area? Is it those stories? Is it stats on how do those two work together when you're trying to change society?
That's a good question. I think it's a combination of both. I used to be a scientist in my previous life. I used to be a quantitative geologist.
Right.
And I was so focused on stats and data. I lived and breathed numbers, even though I'm not the best at maths. And, I think a lot of people cling to data like that because it's so clear to understand, 1 equals 1. Everyone understands numbers. It's the universal. They say maths is the universal language, right? But you can't also dismiss the depth of understanding you can get from qualitative data. So from stories, from sharing, from artistic expression. So I think it's the whole spectrum. You can't have one without the other. Government and other funding bodies and, and the media like to be able to say, 15% of XYZ happened, or you've had a 25% decrease in hate and harm since Moss has started. I don't know, but hopefully. But also, there's such power, that one story around that person who was saying, I have now come to realize that hate and harm is everywhere. You can't quantify that experience, And even in sharing or uploading stories, where people can hear your voice or see your face and see with their own eyes or hear with their ears, this had this experience on me. And you can almost empathize or sympathize because you can see how it affects their body. You can't, discredit the power of all the forms of communication, all the forms of data that we can collect. So we want it all of it.
What would you recommend that people do if they are suffering with some of the experiences that you went through? If you could go back and tell young Trisha what to do, what would you say?
I would tell her, or I would tell anyone, I guess not to judge yourself for feeling the way you feel. It is wonderful if you have someone that you can openly share with, no holds barred, being able to express how you're feeling with the knowledge that you're not going to be judged about it. Even if you have created hate or said something harmful, being able to turn to someone you feel comfortable with and being I said this thing and I actually feel terrible about it. So I would encourage everyone to just talk more with people or in spaces that they feel comfortable to. You know, if you don't have that, we have ironically a page on our website called The Void, where we got this concept from like screaming into the void, where people can like just vent their frustrations and it just disappears. I actually have no clue where it goes. I think it just literally eviscerates.
Right, okay.
But, you know, I think in general, people tend to bottle things up and suppress things. And I think step one is actually just letting that all out. Like whether you go to see a therapist, whether you talk to friends or family, scream into the void, you know, express how you're feeling in safe and constructive ways. And I would also I guess, say to everyone, you know, who's experiencing that or might have said something that they regret or maybe even not regret, like, you know, hate and harm is totally human. It's a part of the human experience. Harm is something that is a teaching tool. Like when you touch a hot plate, you then learn not to do that. So it's not necessarily about removing all of these aspects of what is a true human experience, but just learning to, I guess, tread more carefully around the things that can hurt someone or hurt yourself, and to embrace all aspects of your being and know that it's okay to be a human, but it's also good to want to grow and, you know, expand your knowledge on some of these things too.
Trisha, thanks for coming in today.
No worries. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Parley podcast. To register for future events, you can find the link in our show notes. You'll also be able to explore our research and hear people's stories about experiencing harm online. You can find us across all socials at sticksstones.org. The Parley Unplugged is proudly brought to you by Darla Health, your personal wellbeing partner. Darla is an Australian-born AI-powered wellbeing app designed to help you understand yourself, your emotions, and provide personalised feedback and tools to improve individual mental wellbeing. Head to hellodarla.com to learn more.